Hello everyone and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I am your host Nick Henning and we're rocking the middle of the table today because actually that seems like it's the best for Wingspan. This is a 2.5 hour game which we were playing at 200% speed so that we could be done in half that time. If you're looking to play this at or watch this at a more regular speed with prior year champion Angela Tao, they do record that over on the World Series of Board Gaming official channel. With, of course, Chris George. But if you're ready to watch here, let's get into it. Alrighty. We've got our dice rolled for round one. Let me just adjust setting. Okay, and we're back to it. So we've got a whole bunch of different worms and wheat, but that's kind of about it. I guess there's also a fish sitting there in the middle, which might lead to some awkward moments in the game as folks are playing through. Are we actually? Okay, great. Looks like Votto here in seat 1 kept 3 food and a really, really good starting bird. The Ruddy Duck here is a great way to get that card drawing engine started, and I think is one of the best cards you could have in your opening hand here. So that's a pretty sweet start. It's a card that draws 2, discard 1. You'll get to shuffle through and draw into things that you like. So I'm not sure what the other card that he kept was, but it's got to be good if he's got a lot of drawing options here. C2, I believe this gentleman's name is Young. Hopefully I got that correct, but I'm going to pronounce it as Young the whole time. And he takes a Hummingbird, which is one of my favorite cards, honestly, in the game. It's really grown on me the more and more I've played Wingspan. Everybody gets something, which seems like a bad thing, but it's 1 resource for 4 victory points, and it can go anywhere. And so the flexibility of it and the fact that it can turn on a food engine for you if you have no other system for food engine is very powerful. In seat 3 here, we have Wei, who picked up the buzzard that sits in the top row. And if other people go hunting, you can get food. Now, at a top table like this, it means you probably aren't going to get a lot of food from it, at least not early. And so he's probably putting it there more for infrastructure. I don't think you can really count on good players to necessarily go hunting early because it's not a strong way to play the game here. And then Henry in seat 4 is going to grab a food right off the bat here, which isn't the strongest necessarily, but probably has a specific plan of what he's going to play with it. It's going to get him started. Votto here, I really like his turn 2 play where he puts some eggs on his bird here. These eggs can be used to draw even more cards from the deck, meaning that you don't have to take quite as many draw actions because of the way that the default board gives 1 food, 1 card, and 2 eggs. Taking that eggs action with 1 bird in the card drawing spot just allows you to get a huge amount of birds along the way. And it looks like we're going to get a 2-wee. I don't know that's quite how that's pronounced, but the bird that sits kind of in the middle there, it can't go in the top, but you almost always put it in the middle because it generates food without. So Young here is probably going to put also his Hummingbird either in the middle or the bottom row, and he's just not going to need to play in the forest all game long. He's going to facilitate everybody else's food situation, but he just doesn't need food all game here. Looks like we got a Grackle here in seat 3 for Wei, which is going to allow him to convert cards into eggs. That's a really nice setup down there. You can kind of essentially turn your card drawing engine into also some point scoring engine every time. And we see Henry drop in for a crest catcher or something like that. I think it's a 5-point bird that allows you to get extra food when you go and get food. So really leaning into that efficiency engine there. He's going to have a lot of food this game with that Hummingbird coming out and a strong top row there. And it looks like Vlatto's starting keep was another bird in the bottom row here, one that's going to allow him to tuck. I like that is a good pair for the bird, the Ruddy Duck that draws a lot of cards. So he'll draw essentially every time he takes a cards action now, 4 cards, discarding 1, so functionally 3 cards, and then he'll tuck 1 underneath that bird. So a lot of card filtering to kind of draw into the best possible cards. With a lot of options there. He's going to need to find a way to make some food, though, and that's going to be his kind of primary limiter so far in the game. Meanwhile, speaking of food, we're going to generate some food while we're making some eggs in seat 2 with Young here. And I think that makes a lot of sense. He's the opposite problem right now of Vlatto, which is how is he going to be drawing cards? Not quite sure how many cards he kept. Looks like a lot because he doesn't seem to have a lot of resources, so he kept a lot of his starting cards here. And actually, in general, around the table, it looks like people kept a lot of their starting cards. I'm not seeing a lot of food lying around for folks. We're going to get a start-off draw here into the Grackle. And this is a really interesting tension in the game. You can either put 2 eggs on the Grackle, or you can fire off the draw card, tuck it, or tuck something and put an egg on the grackle. And now next turn you can fire off the grackle, draw the extra card. And I actually like the way that Wei chose to do this here. Rather than placing the 2 eggs, which I was just talking up a moment ago, if you have a card that makes eggs by tucking cards, it scores a similar number of points, lets you see another card and make some decisions based on what he's got, a decent grip of cards in his hand. And that's going to get some flexibility there. Henry here is going to take advantage of the crest catcher in order to get a pair of food. He's got a lot of cards in hand because, obviously he's only played the 1 bird so far, so he's got a couple options of things to do. And Vlado says, I'm going to go to the top of the deck, which makes sense. I don't think anything that's in play is super exciting. That pileated woodpecker, I believe, on the left side there allows you to place eggs while you're running your top row. So I think that Henry might be really eyeballing that card on the top left. That could be a good way for him to run his essentially food row and become super duper rich. But it's not necessarily the question that he needs to answer. Really, he needs to answer the cards question for himself first. So there might be nobody really looking at that pileated woodpecker. And Vlado here says, I'm fully drawing for cards, which I think makes a lot of sense. He's going to have to do a little cycling here. I didn't see anything super thrilling on his flip throughs. He has a discard there of a Say's Phoebe. And I didn't quite see what else he necessarily drew in there. A card that I know that chicken looking card, grouse or whatever, draws bonus cards. You don't want to be playing that until later. It's quite expensive. And we're going to see the 2E's friend, the hummingbird, come out here, making for a full food middle row here. Now, the problem is that this is a really, really good setup. The problem that Young might come into this game is that he will need to find a way to score extra points because he's making his egg row a little bit weaker in terms of point scoring. So that's something to consider. We're going to see, is that a grebe? I think that's the duck that draws, I think it's like the ruddy duck, draws 2 cards, keep 1. It's definitely some kind of card filtering duck. Can't totally see from this angle, but Wei's got himself set up with a nice point scoring bottom row here that's gonna do some fun things along the way. He does still need to find a way to get his food engine operated, and Henry just fires off with some eggs so that he can probably play another bird along the way here. Maybe he's looking to play something else into that top row there, it looks like. Vlado, not too happy with his cards, is going to go essentially fishing for a lot more. We see that he's drawn a turn here, which is not great because he's already got an okay bottom row. He's really looking to make things that make food for him or can go into the egg row. Like, he's not looking to restructure that bottom row unless he can build, I guess, a full bottom row combo. But he's got a lot of card draw and already, has a boatload of cards in his hand. I'm not seeing anything. Is that a nuthatch there to go into the food row? We see him flip it to the front. And other than that, he's drawing a lot of crap right now. I mean, by crap, I just mean birds that don't do obvious engine things and are like solid, mid to late game plays in terms of points. But he really needs something for this food engine structure. So we're going to see that nuthatch do some work there. But he really isn't, I think, drawing into exactly what he'd want to here. They're also playing the version here where they do have the power birds. And I don't think he drew any of those. And so, not quite as powerful as I think he quite would like it to be. Was that a straight run of the picking up of food? It looks like. That's a really interesting choice. Rather than getting other players food for the hummingbird, Young is noticing that everybody at the table is kind of a little bit struggling with food, right? Both of two of the 3 opponents at the table here need food even more than he does. But it is interesting to take an action to get that grub. He could take 2 egg actions to get 2 wheat, but doesn't have the space to place them. So really awkward to set up a bird engine or like a food creating engine in your middle row and then take the forest row anyway. So I'll be curious to see what follow-up card he plays with that grub there. And I think his choice makes sense, but it is awkward. It doesn't lend itself to having had a particularly strong start here. We kind of get a little bit of a glance here at Wei's hand, and it looks like his is quite similar to Vlado's in that he's got a lot of, point-scoring birds that you might play later. He debates which one he wants to throw away, but I'm not seeing anything that he wants to play immediately. And, knowing that and knowing that he picked up the bird that goes up in the forest above, we can tell that he definitely is scrambling to find some way to make the forest work here. We get a little wood, is it a red-headed woodpecker, I think, going into the forest here, making Henry have a solid food engine. He's the only one who's kind of up and active with a full food engine that's going to draw him 3 food every time that's happening. But he does really need to find a way into some card draw here. I believe that woodpecker also gives points when he does it. Oh, I should pull up that Wingspan birds, just in case I can look them up. Oh, we see a wood duck here, which is normally a really exciting card. One of the more powerful cards in the game. You can put some card drawing into your top row, but Vlado already has good card draw. Yeah, we see him just like drawing into more and more birds that are not really supporting the game plan that he wants. Which is kind of a bummer. I mean, he's drawn into like 9 cards right now or something like that. Let's see if I can figure out what woodpecker this is that's in play. It looks like it's a red-bellied woodpecker that caches food, maybe? No, red-headed, which caches food. Okay. Lots of card rips. We see the wood duck go to the front, but I don't think it's going to be played. More cards drawn off the top here. I think Vlado's just not drawing into what he needs. He's got stuff that supports, if you have card draw needs. He's got some stuff that scores points. Is that like a Bobo link in there? He might have even just straight up discarded the duck there, which I think makes sense. The duck costs 3 food. It's not. He already has card drawing systems. It's a completely redundant card at this point. So if that is the card that he got rid of, that's a good and disciplined take, even though like in a vacuum, it's very good. Looks like we're gonna get some eggs here, and now we're gonna see whether we decide to spin the friendly wheel or not. Are people gonna get food? Or are we going to choke the board? Looks like he needs access to some food. And this is going to be a really nice deal for players 1 and 3, Vlado and Wei, who are going to get access to some food that they would struggle to have otherwise. It's hard to say no to your sharing bird, but currently as it stands, I actually think that those other 2 players are getting a little bit more out of it. But, you have to beat all 4 players to win. So I respect the choice to run it. And I also think it would be pretty reasonable to not run it. It depends a lot on what he's going to play in his next turns in terms of what the needs for the food were here. Interesting pickup from Henry. He picks up a cranberry, which I think is it the crest catcher? Let's see if I'm right about crest catcher. I think I can get it, or does crest catcher only? No, it's definitely not called a crest catcher. Crest something. Great crested flycatcher. Okay, he only gets worms, so it actually does make sense that he's getting a berry there. I'm confusing it with another bird that gets berries and stuff like that. Let me see if I can figure out what that grebe is too. I think it's a grebe. It could be the pied. Oh yeah, it's the pied-billed grebe that does indeed draw 2, keep 1. So we see exactly that happening now. And this is, I think, what Vlado and Wei are doing here is a pretty standard. Good opening to me. You set up a card drawing engine, you draw a bunch of cards, you figure out your game plan for the rest of the game here. It's even stronger, actually. We haven't talked about the round goals here, but the first round goal here is to have birds in wetlands. And so the way that the game is set up even further incentivizes that. We also see in the second round that we're looking at forests, which Henry is certainly most set up for. The third round here for total birds, which encourages card draw and food draw. And then the fourth round looks like it's eggs in some kind of basket that I can't quite see what type of nest that is in. What did we do? Did we draw anything exciting here? We see a couple discards. We still have the vulture flipped to the front. There's like a little chickadee there that goes into the forest. Not seeing a ton of obvious choices. We see another hummingbird come out, and certainly that could do a whole lot of food fixing for people. Vlado kind of shrugs a little bit as he says, yeah, what am I going to do? Henry, by the way, I want to point out, did pick up the pileated woodpecker that we talked about before, a way to make eggs running the food row. So he's going to build himself a monster food row. He's going to need to find some way to draw cards so that he can play out those birds. If he can solve that problem, I think he's in a really good setup here. And he's doing something a bit orthogonally from the other players, which tends to be pretty good. Doing something different. In a vacuum, Young in C2, I think has sort of the best setup so far, just that like a really strong egg row just tends to be stronger in base wingspan than the other ones. Vlado says, look, I picked up a hummingbird-led nuthatch here. Let me drop the nuthatch into play and start getting some food for myself. And he can start throwing away cards to draw more food. Normally that's a really expensive cost, but it's an option here. Looks like this is a game of all friendship, as Young here is going to drop out an oyster catcher, rip a lot of cards off the top of the deck, and we're going to draft around the table. Vlado's probably most disappointed by this, as he's least in need of cards, and he's second to last to draft out of the 5 cards that are coming around the table here. And Henry, I think, is actually the biggest winner of the downfall recipient of this. He's likely not to get anything super amazing with 2 players picking in front of him, but it's entirely plausible that they're looking at things that he doesn't quite care about. Like, I see right in there like a little Willet. I see Hunting Hawk, and a bird that's worth points that you play into the wetlands. So is it called a Willet? Oh, we're looking at our hand now, I think. Oh, is that a bush tit? That looks like a bush tit. I think bush tit's one of the best cards in the game. Just the fact that it's like a wild location, allows you to tuck cards for eggs. It's got a lot of space on it. Pretty cheap. I really like that card a lot. I think it does a lot in a lot of situations. And man, we see a ton of cards here in Wei's hand. A mix of big points. We see the scissor fly catcher prominently displayed at the front of the box here, which is worth 8 points. And pass around the table. I didn't quite see what cards got scooped up by others as I was inspecting Wei's hand, but I suspect that Henry picked up one of those water birds that was not of interest to our friend Wei here, who happily will drop out his vulture, which has no hawks to go off of. He's just trying to build himself a food engine as cheaply as possible, which makes a lot of sense. And we get a woodpecker dropped into play by Henry to build his Mondo top row, and he no longer is required to run the egg row, which he has no support for. So that he's got himself essentially fully set up by the end of round 1 with a really good system, even though he is not doing anything for the round goal and still does not have a card drawing engine. But the rest of it, he's got kind of solved. We see here a Northern Cardinal for Vlado, which is going to give him a lot of flexibility in terms of the food. It's going to give him a lot more food access, which he's, I think, clearly been on the hunt for. And so he goes and gets himself a berry, and it looks like he's about to roll all the dice, and he needs a wheat here, and he smiles as he flips indeed into a wheat. The odds of flipping a wheat here are incredibly high, so I'm glad that he didn't have another kind of bad beat here as he runs through this row, paying a card to get himself a second food. And now he can put the Cardinal into play, and then all of a sudden he's got the basic engine of the game, card drawing and food set up. And then he's going to be looking probably to build a middle row, and that's kind of playing really kind of the most fundamental version of this game. Young in seat 2 here is bumping up against the classic problem of putting all your food guys in the middle row, which is, hey, I'm running out of space for where these eggs can go. He really does need to be playing things out. And looks like we're going to do a hummingbird for everybody situation, which, again, Henry is the one who's probably least happy to see this situation going on. Vlado is probably second least happy to see this, given that he's now, we know, getting a food engine online. And Wei is quite happy with this circumstance. But obviously at this stage, so is Young, who doesn't have any other food generating systems of his own. So at this stage, we're moving into the territory where firing off the hummingbird, I think, is essentially obvious for him. Everybody else is doing something with food. He has no food plan currently. Well, he does have a food plan. It's running the hummingbird. Which is just to say we can expect that hummingbird to share things a lot, and we can expect to see a very high scoring game here. I do think these kind of like altruism strategies are incredibly powerful in this game. It's actually one of my favorite things about Wingspan, as I've gotten better and better at it, is learning that those altruism strategies are sneaky good in this game. We get a little basic chickadee here, so we have a little running row for our middle. And we basically see that Vlado and Wei are playing the same fundamental strategy here, which makes a lot of sense. And I think it's generally the strongest approach, right? Having that sort of card draw, food, and then let's make a really strong middle row and run it out. But they need to draw into those cards to make that work. Pileated Woodpecker here fires off, and looks like most of our opponents actually don't get to take advantage of it. No, that's not true. Only one of our opponents doesn't get to take advantage of it. We see a nuthatch and a chickadee scooping up some eggs from the pileated woodpecker. But Henry does really need access to those eggs, but so do those other players. This is kind of a miss primarily for Young so far. So we see that altruism being kind of a mixed bag for folks. And then we see a tie. Tie for that top slot in the first round there, but it's a round down, so not a very strong scoring round for either of them. A lot of wetland birds coming out here for card draw, which is a nice get for Henry, who needs to fix this problem. So I wouldn't be surprised to see his very first action of the round to be a card draw. And I don't think the other players here are necessarily super incentivized. I mean, actually Young here in C2 might be up, but it looks like he has a plan with a Raven. He's probably been holding this from the beginning and setting something up so that he can play this Raven probably into the middle row. Right, so now this is actually interesting. I think Young is going hilariously a little bit overboard. Like, he's got a Raven here and a Hummingbird and a Towee, so drawing upwards of 3 or 4 food every time he's running an eggs row. Incredibly powerful engine. He's going to need to find some way to get cards into play, or cards into his hand, so they can play all these cards out. And that definitely puts him in a nice position, but I'm wondering if he's going to be able to use all of his food before the end of the game. That's going to be a challenge to see if he's going to be able to take advantage of this, because when he's running that middle row, he's not going to be scoring as many points as other people running that middle row, but it is going to take them longer to get those things up and live. We see a bunch of draws from the middle here, including one of the wetland birds, the one that lets you tuck and put an egg on. We could see essentially, rather than running an egg row, maybe we'll just build an incredibly powerful wetland row with a huge tuck engine. And I see actually another tuck bird in hand, the tuck and egg bird in hand. So my guess is this is where we're seeing Wei going, is structuring a bottom row for point scoring rather than a middle row for point scoring. And fortunately for Henry, we do still see Forrester's turn in play, which is a wild for that last round, whatever that last round is, and a way to draw into more cards. It just sees more cards. It doesn't actually get more cards. It's one of the worst of the card drawing powers, but it's only one resource for 4 points. Henry would be happy to play more resources. Never mind. Henry has his card draw problem solved. This explains why he kept more cards in his starting hand. He has a Franklin's Gull here. He has a Killdeer here. And the Killdeer is his card drawing system now. He has basically food in the top row, totally set up, and a card draw in the middle row. He doesn't even need to play any wetlands birds at all. And I would say of the setup so far, Henry is easily my favorite to win here. We see the absolute power of these power birds just kind of morphing the shape of the game. And I suspect that both of these players kind of kept those early on. Although I actually wonder about Young, if anybody knows whether he drew that Raven off of the Oyster Catcher or not, because he does get to draw 5 cards into the deck. So it's definitely a curious question. Flato here says, all right, well, I didn't have any of these dream cards, but I will go rip into some other stuff. And he does scoop up the Harrier here, and I think that Harrier is probably going into the middle row. He picks up a Trumpeter Swan because he sees that it can be worth a lot of points when he converts. He doesn't need to convert a bunch of food into it, but scoops out. We see a Condor in his hand, which is a nice free card that lets you some bonus points and can buff out your rows a little bit. And yeah, actually a couple more, solid point scoring birds. One that goes into the wetlands and lets you play a second bird. One that gives you more bonus cards. So certainly some things that you would draw if you were a player who made a lot of food. And so I think those are some good scoop ups there. Looks like we're drawing into full bird card drawing systems at this stage if we're in Young's seat, which I think is absolutely the correct choice for him. It's a little bit of a shame for him that he doesn't get that Warbler. The Warbler is absolutely worth some points. And that Canadian Goose actually might be something that he's eyeballing because he's going to have probably extra food. And the Canadian Goose is a way to turn that food into victory points 2 at a time. Looks like we have a food run here for Wei. And then we got some eggs and Killdeer action for Henry. Looks like he's debating whether he wants to place a third egg with a food, or maybe he's just deciding what food he's going to eat. Or what eggs he's going to eat, I guess. I think it matters too much here. He wants to try to remove as many things as possible from woodpecker nests, the cavity nests. He takes the Canadian goose off board saying, I'm really good at making food. I'm probably going to have a fair amount of this. Happy to throw that into the middle row. And it looks like also a hawk was taken off, a kind of cheap hawk that can go in and incidentally score points throughout. Here we see that cardinal that we talked about before. So now Vlado's got his full food engine online as well, drawing essentially upwards of 3 food and a point every time he runs that row. Not the best food, but still good food, right? Cranberries don't show up on a lot of bird cards, but generally you can figure out some ways to do it when you have a hand of about 12 cards like he does. All right, looks like we're going to get a run of the Chihuahua. Is that a Chihuahua? Whatever raven that is. I don't think it's a Chihuahua raven. I think it's the other raven. Common raven? It's a raven. My guess is that we're no longer going to see hummingbirds being blasted at this stage. It's too helpful to the other players who need food, and we already have a good system for making food. We're making 3 food per run here, which is more than enough every time we're running eggs. We probably won't see any more shared hummingbird food for the rest of the game, is my guess. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I think that Young probably drew that raven off of the oyster catcher, because if you started with the raven in hand, I don't think taking a hummingbird out of the middle is a very sensible play. It's too weird of a first play. So it's still 4 points and a way to get some food, but I think that if you're making a game plan around the raven being played at the beginning of round 2, which is the WSBG rule, can't be the case. So I think the oyster catcher found that raven for him. Looks like we had some food run here for Wei, who's just kind of structuring his whole game plan. He's got a boat of cards there to figure it out. Henry drops the hawk that he picked up. Is that a Swainson's hawk, maybe? Just to make sure that egg row is generating some points along the way, which is really important because he's got food online. He's got card drawing online thanks to the killdeer. So he needs to find a way to make sure that he is scoring lots of points as well to win. People sometimes make this mistake of just making too much stuff and playing mediocre birds out rather than finding ways into winning the game. And I like that this early play of a hawk here is going to make it so that row is doing a little bit better. However, it is unfortunately going to be paying Wei's vulture every time you choose to run it. So we'll have to see what Henry thinks about that. I think it's a complicated choice. We've got a couple woodland birds here that are being played out. This, I think, is mostly just their spaces to play. The first one doesn't cost any food. We've got one that lets us play 2 things. And this round gives points for having played birds into the forest. So let's at least contest there and see if we can get something going on. We are indeed going to see a full tucking row this game. The bush tit coming into play. And so now we have the grackle and the bush tit and the yellow blackbird that also tucks. So we're going to see when Wei's fully online here. He's going to do something like draw 3, 4 cards. He's going to draw 5 cards, discard one of them. So 4 cards, tuck 3 of those cards and get 3 eggs. So he's going to be scoring 6 points for the 3 tucks and the 3 eggs, but he's going to need to find a way to throw those eggs off of those birds throughout the course of the game. That's going to be his primary challenge, is doing that weave there, but that row is going to be scoring more points than most egg rows are going to. He says, you know what? Henry says, I am going to go ahead and go hunting. I'm happy to give you the food, but it is victory points that I need to win this game, and I will get you set up here, which I think is really good for Wei. I think that every time he needs to get food, he's going to need to take a top row action. And so every time Henry successfully hunts, that's less food that Wei is going to struggle to take with an action. It functionally gives him a half an action. And Wei needs to be able to get food so that he can play birds into play, so that he can take the eggs off of those birds that he's tucking things onto. That's hilariously going to be one of the primary motivators for him to play more birds into play, is to remove eggs from those guys as that's going along, which is just really, really interesting as a way to approach that. So I'm not 100% sure that I agree with Henry's choice here to go hunting, but you know what? I take it back. Like, there's definitely a big threat across the table from Young here. You can't play cute and think that you're going to defeat a raven. So yeah, you just got to maybe squeak out every point you can. So I take it back. I like Henry's choice here, but I do think it's something to pay attention to. I don't think it's like an obvious every time choice, something to think about. A point, food is worth a whole lot more than a point at this stage in the game. but there are multiple opponents to beat. So I do actually like that choice. Looks like Vlado here is going to go collecting food. He doesn't care at all about all of those rats that are in play, and will get himself the same starting set of food that he began the game with, making him quite rich right now in food. Nuthatch having collected a handful of berries to put into their tree. The nuthatches outside, for me, by the way, are pretty sad because we had our big dead tree cut down today, and so they don't have as much storage, which, you know, honestly, I'm pretty sad about, but better than it falling on my house, I think. Run here for the Raven. And it doesn't look like it's going to be a problem this game, but there's sort of an interesting dynamic with Ravens that if people are finding ways to make food that don't involve taking from our central thing right here next to our face, then you can see actually kind of like this can get stuck into a static, state, which can be really challenging for players that are actually using the bird feeder properly. Voltron's online. The Wetland of Death is live. Love it. Really exciting to see that in a final. That's a good way to compete with Ravens and Killdeers. You know, there's a couple power birds in play, but Wei has I think probably the best combo setup that you can have in base Wingspan. Combos don't necessarily win Wingspan. I think one thing that's actually really nice about Wingspan is that combos matter, but also just pure value matters. There's a good tension between that engine building and then just playing stuff that's good. So I do think it's the best combo setup, but I don't know that that's going to beat things that are just good. We'll have to see. Well, we're running a mid-row here. Where are we at right now? Yeah, it looks like we're running a mid-row here. Caching and stuff like that. I think Henry is debating, maybe this is a different kind of woodpecker, one that you decide whether you get points or resources, because he's mulling this over, and he's got to be mulling it over because he's trying to decide if it goes on the bird or into his supply. But he has a lot of wheat. I guess he's got big plans. I mean, which is fair. Like, he's got a killdeer. He's going to have a lot of cards to play. I really wonder what that calculation was, but without seeing his hand, we're sitting around the table, we're saying, okay, he's got a lot of cards in his hand he's going to play. I'm also inclined to think that he's got something that takes a lot of wheat. I mean, it's really his only option, but the fact that he'd make that choice, so maybe he's going to run out of pheasant soon or something like that. I'm not sure how much that matters for us to know, but we might know it. Purple Martin dropped into play here for Vlado, who's finally getting into the middle row. And we see our Raven player just straight up pivoting into points as we play a Wild Turkey for 8. This, I think, should be going into the forest row. You don't want to crap up your middle row. I don't love this play. What it does right now is it means that when we're running the middle row, we're getting 4 eggs instead of 3 eggs, which is fine. But in the long run, it means that when we're running the middle row, this bird isn't doing anything. So without knowing his hand, I can't say for sure that I'm not a fan of this, but I think that the upper ceiling of Raven play is my middle row isn't doing the work. And I'm really worried that this middle row is not doing the work. He's going to be running this middle row for 4 points versus Wei, who's running his bottom row for 6 points. And so he's essentially saying, I'm only going to win this game through a huge amount of bird plays. So if he's looking at his hand, he's saying, I got a lot of points and birds in my hand, and I'm going to be putting them into play, and I really want that extra 1 point from the turkey right now. Fine. But he's going to have access to so much food that he could convert that food into eggs anyway. I really think that turkey should have gone to the top row. Not to mention that this round's contest is for forests in the top row. So I do really think this is a mistake. And I don't mean to harp on it for too much, but I think we'll see what the end of this round looks like, but it's approaching pretty rapidly, I think. I think we've taken 6 actions, it looks like. So yeah, it's very rapidly approaching the end of the round here. Henry pauses for a minute. Looks like he's considering his options in play. I guess maybe he's eyeballing that owl as just a way to convert some rats into points. Maybe he's deciding what bird he wants to play out of his hand. I don't think Chipping Sparrow is very good. Loggerhead Shrike, I think, is like an absolute F tier card. There's a card discard. Oh, I see. We're picking up more food. Oh no. Why did we discard a card? Oh, it was a bonus card. I see, because he's playing a Cerulean Warbler. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, nope, he discards something else. All right, well, I missed the card situation, and that's fine. Or maybe it wasn't a discard. I'm just confused physically anyway. Cerulean Warbler is a nice choice for him here. The top row is already doing exactly what Henry wants to be doing, and he doesn't want to be running it forever. You know, he kind of wants to run it maybe a couple more times at most, ideally, so he can kind of just run his food row, place out all of his birds in the meadows row, the plains row, and then run that plains row until the end of the game, kind of thing. You know, there's a little bit more nuanced weaving in there, but that idea I think quite persists. Vlado here is going to feed a ton of cranberries to this catbird, which is going to duplicate this purple martin. So all of a sudden he's going to be running that middle row for 5 points, 3 points plus draw 2 and tuck 2. That's a really nice middle row, and I think I'm happy to see Vlado, who has had, I think, the least thrilling start here, even though he drew the most cards, set up something here that does suddenly look like it's pretty spicy and maybe can be competitive through the game. So I'm excited to see that for him. We see a run of the middle row here. Unsurprisingly, no hummingbird action for everybody out here. And we'll see an Eastern Phoebe come into play, which is, it's a wild nest for that last round of competition. But this is also just a way to give everybody food. Everybody's got a food engine now. So giving out every extra food is just a great choice for Wei in Seat 3, who wants everyone to be a little bit richer because he really cares about himself being richer so that he can run that bottom row, play birds, run that bottom row, play birds. And he wants to run that top row as efficiently as possible so that he doesn't have to do it all that often. Looks like we're getting Henry doing a run on the berries. We've never seen this many berries get consumed in any game. It kind of implies to me that he might be holding an Oriole in hand. I'm not quite sure why else you'd grab 2 berries with Catbird already in play. So I'm expecting an Oriole. I'm trying to think of what else it might be. I guess there's a couple grassland birds that use, maybe he has like a Eastern Bluebird or something and something else that he's playing. That's possible too. Looks like we're again grabbing the food rather than cashing in on our bird, knowing that we have, Henry has so much food, and he really doesn't at a certain point want to be running this row anymore. So he's saying, look, I have this food, but I'm going to use all of it. I'm not going to take a victory point and cash on this bird and then later want to regret and say I want to run the food row again. And this makes a lot of sense. This is like what I call the Princes of Florence problem. Prince of Florence is a game, came out in the early 2000s, that essentially, like, when you did a great works, you get to choose how much was victory points and how much was converted to money. And there really was no decision for the first half of the game. You just converted it into money. And so that's what I mean when I say Princes of Florence problem of the decision is not interesting because you're going to need the resources at some point, and that's exactly what Henry is saying here. I'm going to find a way to use these resources. We end the round here, and Henry will walk away with first. And Young doesn't really miss out by having 2 rather than 3. I think he misses out maybe on a victory point or something like that. But it's also an extra victory points that I think Wei is going to have for having 3 guys in that row rather than 2 guys in the row. So, it's small, but I think those kinds of small differences do make a difference in a game like this where everybody's off to, frankly, a pretty good start. This is going to be a huge game. We see, I didn't comment, by the way, but Vlado dropped out his hawk, so he's making an even stronger middle row there. There's an Eastern Bluebird that we were talking about. Barn Owl, which is worth a decent chunk of victory points. A Night Owl Heron. So that's like a really good flop row for a late game. And we're going to see Wei snap that Heron off of play. I think he's planning on putting it into play or just doesn't want anyone else to play it. I'm actually kind of almost surprised that he doesn't just sort of like hate draft. The Barn Owl is not like crazy good. It's a solid play at this stage in the game. But the Eastern Bluebird, I think, is a nice play for getting your egg row up quickly. It's a good number of points. It's a lot of space on it for putting your eggs. I think Henry might be interested in that Bluebird, and I think I would have considered drafting it. Henry drops a house finch into play. This is really good. It's adding in just another tuck card. He's going to cycle cards, but also more importantly, it's just scoring an extra point every time he's going to run that middle row. Ooh, we see a bird that I forget what it's called, but a little ducky that if you play it, every time someone places eggs, you're going to be able to place an egg yourself. We're getting to the stage of the game where you can almost count on every turn someone doing egg stuff. I guess maybe less so with Way not in the table here. We see a bad hunt from a hawk trying to kill a way too big for a duck, and we're seeing some tuck and draws, and we do see that Vlado's hand at this stage actually is full of a bunch of decent birds. He's gonna have a hard time, I think, playing them with food issues. He doesn't want to be doing that action too much. He's got a condor, he's got a 7-point bird, an 8-point bird, a lot of options here. We're gonna see a double play from Young here, who's just gonna fill up his board full of stuff. These are birds that we saw him pick up last round. So this seems about right, and he's certainly got the resources to make it happen. This is just a good, solid turn. 7 points or 9 points of birds, but pay 2 eggs. It's a great get, and also, of course, he needs to be paying eggs to make sure he's got room to continue to run his egg row. I suspect egg space is going to be a problem for him. It often is for a food-based central strategy. Way here runs the Mega Engine, and his Grackle is now at the point that he is full of eggs, which is going to mean that he's got to pay some close attention to how he's managing when he's playing out new stuff. Looks like he's a little poor in terms of food resources, which I think makes sense, but I suspect we're going to see a food row run next turn. He's got still a boat of cards in hand, even though he's tucking 3 cards per turn. That Grebe, having run a few times earlier in the game, just means that he's got so much extra gas in the tank. And that last one was a discard there. Oh, our lighting's getting funny as the sun is moving, and we're fading away. I'm gonna turn into ether. All right, looks like we got an egg running row from Henry here. What that says to me is that he's out of birds to play, especially since he's drawing a random bird off the top of the deck. Because he had eggs available to him. Yeah, he had eggs available to him. Looks like a successful hunt here. Which again, not fully clear who that works out better for. I think actually still at this stage, it's a little bit better for Way, but we are playing a 4-player game. And you still got to watch out for number 1. So I definitely at this stage agree with the use. Like round 3 is when I start kind of turning off my brain and the Hawks and say, yeah, we're running them. We're here to score points. So I think that I agreed with Henry's choice to do it in round 2. And now I definitely agree with it at this stage. But it is still good for Way. I think it's better for Way than it is for Henry. If he thinks that Way is the only opponent that he really has, then that's something that he should be paying attention to. Looks like we got a cut here, so Henry really debating, I think, his last draw here. It looks like he drew something off the top of the deck. He's debating whether he wants to drop that bluebird and quickly spam out that middle row there. So it looks like he didn't necessarily have a plan with the other cards in his hand and said, I'll do bluebird instead. Definitely a lot better than the card we just saw flip off the top of the deck. Frankly, I don't know much of what else he'd be looking for, but then again, I can see most of the other players' hands, and the fact that they all have drawn these like Mondo 8 and 9-point birds that are in the deck, like all of the really big point scoring birds might be in play in people's hands right now. But we're also running through this deck like crazy. In fact, where is the deck? I don't know exactly where the deck is, but I think I missed. Okay, we're running an egg row here, so we're debating some tucks. I could be wrong about this, by the way, but there's I think a mild. Ooh, it looks like Vlado actually likes that enough to put it in his hand and flip something else to the back. I think that you're supposed to maybe tuck the cards under the purple martin rather than the catbird. I'm actually legitimately not sure, and it also doesn't really matter. I'm not going to bother looking it up, but I've seen people do that before. And it's not entirely clear to me whether the catbird does their power or it allows you to run their other power. It doesn't really matter, so who cares? I'm just filling airspace as we're looking at folks executing their actions here. And Young, I think, unsurprisingly, is probably close to out of cards at this point in time. He doesn't have the same kind of card drawing engine that the other players did, so he has to take a normal card draw action here. And this is the part of his game that is less exciting, right? He's got a really good food drawing system where he plays eggs at the same time and all that, but drawing cards is garbage for him. This row is laughably bad, right? It does essentially nothing except for draw him 3 cards at the cost of an egg, which I am sure that he spent because he wants to be doing this as little as possible. There's an argument to be made for picking up the Barn Owl. It's not hard for him to play thanks to the Raven, but it's not an insane amount of points or anything like that. So I just think the Owls are pretty. But it's a solid number of points. It's not hard for him to play. It's not so good at hunting. You know, the deck is sort of like split. Like there's definitely better cards, and then that card is better than a bunch of the cards. Like I would say it's like pretty close to 50th percentile in terms of like, do I want to draw this near the late game? We're already running a food thing, although we need to draw another card here. And yeah, I don't think the Western Meadowlark would have been any better for him, so I think it was probably the right pickup. Unsurprisingly, we say way here go into food acquisition land. He snaps off the rat. Looks like he's going to run out the heron as quickly as possible. And this makes a lot of sense for multiple reasons. The heron is going to help him solve his food problems without having to go to the food row. It's worth 9 points. And more than anything else, it takes an egg from any other bird to run. And so that's going to facilitate him efficiently running his bottom row, because not only is he getting the food to play birds out, which costs eggs, but he's going to spend eggs to get that food with the night heron. It's a very, very good pickup for this strategy. And I like that he's prioritizing playing it. You know, he has a fish and looks like he got the resources that he needs to play that night heron out. So we're going to see that play on the next turn, I'm sure of it. Well, this is coming out, and you can pop off of his bird there. There we go. Here comes our bluebird, unsurprisingly. What do we have? Maybe a roadrunner? Kind of would be like a top tier. It's the pheasant that we talked about earlier. Now we understand. I mean, I think we did already understand why he was collecting all that wheat, but here we see a validation of our understanding. Just another way to score points and a lot of space for those points to be scored. So now every time Henry is running that row, he's scoring, depending on if the hawk hits, we'll call that a half point. 1, 4, 5, 6.5 points. And if he spends food, 7.5 points. And if he spends eggs, he can get fewer points and draw some cards, which he might not be doing it. Okay, we are back. Apologies for the mid-video cut. I ran out of disk space abruptly because I was saving to the wrong spot. I was just saying that I'm not sure that Henry actually is planning on even drawing cards for the rest of the game. And it looks like Vlado here scooped up some food on his turn. So you didn't really miss anything. We are picking right back up. You're probably more in tune than I am. I'm catching up a little bit. But looks like we get a normal egg run here from Young, who is going to generate some food along the way. It looks like he maybe even cleaned up his turn already, because we see Wei is anxiously getting ready to do his turn as well, as he's organizing all of his resources and is prepping to play his Night Crown out there. Wei reminds me of me, doing a lot of fidgeting when he's ready. Of course, I opened my window too. Get this super streak here. Great, so yeah, we see the Night Crown live and ready. Voltron is even extra Voltron-y. Huge amount of egg creation here, and we're going to see whether he's going to start pitching food for eggs now. The answer is yes. Now, that might just be a reflection that the fish here isn't really doing any work for him, because Henry can't just run the egg row for the rest of the game. He doesn't have enough space on his birds to make this a reality. So he must know from what he has in hand that he probably has to run the food row one more time and then play a couple birds out, but he's just going to need some more space before the end. Looks like he goes hunting for another bluebird. Wei will scoop up a resource for this, and that Vulture has certainly done its job more than needed this game so far. Yeah, it's like rainbow superhero splash. Okay, that's great. Enough playing with that. We're definitely getting to the stage of the game where things slow down a little bit on players' turns in terms of just making sure you run through and take all the actions there. And we are seeing a Raven play out, a full Power Bird set. We don't have a Franklin's Gull, but everything else we see now active. I think that is the Chihuahua Raven. It's pretty late at this stage. It looks like not a huge play. Vlado had to take a turn to play it. And then now he can run his egg row, but we know that Vlado has a lot of really good cards in hand, and he can use the Gray Catbird to even accelerate that egg and food conversion if he wants to. Okay, this isn't going to work. We're going to pause. This is what I get for recording during the daytime. So yeah, he's going to be able to run that and convert into a huge amount of food. Now, Vlado's got a really, really good system set up, but he is running very low on actions. In fact, looks like we've got 4 actions and we're in the 3rd round here. So 5. So yeah, he's really limited. It's like he can run that row, play bird, but he's running out of space and time, and he's going to want to keep running eggs as much as possible. We see the full, complete Power Bird setup with a drop of Franklin's Gull here. This, to me, at this stage, just kind of seems like a flex. Actually, like Franklin's Gull is like kind of weak now. I mean, maybe if we need to draw some cards, that's fine. But drawing some cards, yeah, I guess it allows us to draw some cards in Young's seat, which maybe he needs to draw another bird or two, but it isn't quite packing the same punch. There's just not a ton of time left to take advantage of this. So he's going to run out of a little bit of juice somewhere there. Looks like we'll whip around the table. I think we just missed a card tuck while I was talking about the Franklin's Gull on Wei's turn. And Henry here goes out fishing for food. He didn't roll a fish, but he just discarded a fish, so I can't imagine that he's too disappointed by that. But he took his time and thought about it, which is sort of interesting. I imagine that he's looking for something very specific to play the things that he wanted to. So we'll have to be... I'm going to come back to this, like... I don't think he needed a fish. Maybe he needed 2 worms or something like that. But, I mean, he took kind of a rainbow of stuff. So maybe he's just being kind of very deliberate and cautious, making sure he doesn't make any mistakes, which makes total sense. And ensuring that he leaves a wheat behind for that woodpecker, which, again, he converts straight into a resource. He manages to go all the way through a shuffle on his entire turn, thanks to the incredible strength of his food row there. Just on his lonesome. Vlado here runs out his middle row. And now we'll get to see what he chooses with the catbird, which is kind of a fun choice. I think where his eggs are doesn't matter too much. This is kind of one of those games where, where your eggs are is sort of trivial. By the way, as we're approaching the end of the round here, certainly we see that Young is going to dominate this category. But there's a little bit of a race between Vlado and... Wei at the bottom, and then Henry's just a little bit above them. So if Henry can hold on to second place at this stage, it actually is worth a couple extra points rather than kind of getting tied up by one of the other players. So Henry's a kind of the most interesting question of the scoring for this round. Looks like a pickup of 4 grain. So we did see a double catbird. What is 4 grain? I mean, I would have guessed the pheasant that we saw before. Oh, we know the trumpeter swan is a part of it. That's 3 of them. And even still, that's really weird. I mean, I know that he's got something that needs worms. I have to imagine that 4 grain can't have been the correct choice there. Maybe it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but just in case you change your mind, you should take the grain you need and then something else. I'm struggling to think of what else he's going to play with all that grain. Should have diversified at least a little bit, I think. Franklin's goal rips off the top. And here's what I'm talking about with, I mean, obviously, like, this is going to be a very nearly full board for Young. But as he's running his food row here, he is making 4 or 5 points, minus 2 to take food and cards, and then get some food along the way. And so his middle row here just really isn't scoring points in the way that, you know, Henry's row is scoring, what did I say, 6.5, 7.5 points. And Way's row here is scoring 6 points. There's our Roadrunner friend. This comes into play, but because it's in the first slot, it actually doesn't eat any of the eggs from the bottom row guys. Well, he's got a little bit of space there, so didn't quite need to make that space. Roadrunner, it's interesting. I mean, it's a card that is like a really solid later game play, especially for someone running the egg row, because there's always a chance that it'll score more points. We see a Canadian goose get dropped down here. And now I understand why Henry was debating that mountain bird. He was debating whether he wanted to put the Canadian goose in the middle row and if he was going to run it, if he was going to have enough wheat to make that a reality. And he's just playing a kind of mediocre bird there because he knows he needs more space. And the Canadian goose becomes a whole lot less exciting. Speaking of things that make points with wheat, now we understand what exactly is going on in Vlado's head. He plays a Sandhill Crane, which is going to allow him to convert all that wheat into victory points throughout the game. That is, of course, a great choice, and the fact that I overlooked that is embarrassing. More crows here. This is just a 6-point bird that goes into play. For a nice normal crow, not a busted crow. And we are just ripping through the cards in this deck as we get to the end of the round here, having played just about everything that's powerful in this game. That deck is looking awfully slim at this stage as we flip a bunch of pretty unexciting birds, honestly. None of these are quite worth an action to pick up and then put into play. And we see 3/4 of the table stand up as we're entering the final round here as the anxiety steps in at full speed. Henry here runs the middle row, debates his choices for a minute, it looks like. He's asking himself whether he's going to eat something. My guess is that he's doing this thinking through, what's my dream? What am I hoping to draw out of the deck here? Am I going to be unhappy if I, spend one of these food? And I think it's the right call right now to not do that. He's got some time between now and the end of the round where he'll probably be able to eat his food. It's not like he can just plant eggs repeatedly over the course of this round and pay all of his food resources. So he's going to, need to do it somehow, some way. He draws one card off the top here and then says, is that a card draw? Oh, from the Finch, of course, for some tuck-in action. And again, he is a successful hunter. That's a hawk does often hit, but really has not struggled to find its targets this game at all. And we run through, and was that a skip? Maybe we didn't draw cards at all. Henry looks like he countered it out, and he probably knows what the rest of his game looks like if he didn't draw cards there. That's really interesting. Vlado here is going to run the middle row. And that crow is going to feed that crane for as much as he likes. And maybe play another bird out. But what does Vlado have for space here? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It's tough to tell exactly because I'm not, but it's something like he's got like something like 16 egg spaces out there. And this is his first action of the round of 5 actions. So he misses the golden eagle. And sorry, my cats are doing weird stuff. Misses the golden eagle with this hunter here. And he's going to duplicate the crane with the catbird. That is brilliant. So when he's running the row now, he's making 4 points for eggs, 4 points for the crane and crow, supporting it across those. and a point for the purple martin. So it's a 9-point row that he's running every time now, which is pretty monstrous. 9.5 because he's got that that hawk there. So that seems really strong. His board's pretty weak though. I mean, those birds in play are at most 5 points. 5, 10, 17, 19, 23, 4, 7. So it's got like maybe 30 points of birds, maybe. So I think he might be coming on online a little bit too little too late, but it's an absolute monster row. It's the best row that there is in the game, and that's saying something in a game where everybody has maximal stuff going on. Now you might be looking at this and saying, wow, Jesus, like these players are just so good. Like, how did this happen? And certainly they're efficient and they know what's up, but I think it's not to be disputed that giving out a handful of hummingbird food at the beginning, it's just going to make everybody more powerful, everybody richer, everybody gets online faster. And when you get online faster, you get more cards faster, you get more resources faster. Oh, we have a vulture, we're also going hunting. You know, everybody's played this game from a perspective of abundance, and because of that, the scores are going to be elevated. So part of it is because they're good players and they know what they're doing, but part of it is just the texture of the game from the beginning. If you put these same 4 players in another game, and you don't put that hummingbird in the beginning, or Young chooses not to grab it at the beginning, this game looks, I think, quite different. Mega Tuck Row here, scoring 5 or 6 points. I didn't actually quite see if the Heron got some food. It looks probably like he did, which makes sense. Wei has a really nice system here, but is going to run a little bit. He's going to run out of space. You know, he needs to play stuff. Although we're seeing that he's got some nice things in hand to play. So as long as he's got the food to drop it out, he's still, you know, he's probably going to have kind of the tightest resource ship at the end. And I think Wei has done a really nice job of managing his resources, considering he can't exactly count on when things come in, thanks to the vulture and resources from other players. So he's played a very adaptable game plan. I think that's showed really nicely here. Henry looks like he is he's turned on speed here as he is sort of activating. He does actually stop and ask for a moment. Do I not want to feed my opponent? We see Vlado here yelling at his his hawk. Do it just like that. Get on board. Get hunting as he runs his crane sand crane situation again. Crow crane. As he runs the crow crane one more time. Crow cat crane. Something like that. Henry here is counting out the points that folks are going to get. While Vlado's running this, let's do a quick kind of rough count of other people's scores. 10, 14, 15, 20, 3, 7, 32. We got like something like mid 30s for Henry's board. 3, 4, 11, 14, 16, 25. About 30 for Wei's board. So everyone's kind of in the same category here, of course, except for Young. 10, 12, 16, 23, 31, 35, 40. Like 45 maybe for Wei's board. He's got a whole lot more points in birds than everybody else. So if we're looking at pretty close on bird points, except for Young's board, and we're looking at a lot of tuck points on Vlado's board from the crane crow and also the purple martin. We've got a lot of tuck points on Wei's board, probably the most tuck points on Wei's board, and then some decent tuck points on Henry's board as well. Not, I think, quite as much as the other players, but he does have more eggs currently in play. So I do think that this kind of tight tension of is there going to be enough space to take all these final actions here? We see an 8-point bird whose name I don't remember, but even though it looks gigantic on the card, I think it's actually really teensy in real life. Henry here runs out the middle row. This is his third action here. And looking around, yeah, I don't think he's got space for all of his eggs here. He's got to play another bird at some point. And he's got 2 greens available. I would assume that it was that 8-point bird or the 7-point warbler, but I've seen that in Vlado's hand, so I don't think Henry has that. And looks like he skips a card draw again, so he's got something he knows that he's playing. He's not really looking for anything else. I mean, it could be something as simple as like a Sandpiper, 5 points for a single resource. Might be the kind of card that he's looking at. Vlado here has a lot of space left, so I think that he is just running his Mega Engine here basically until the end of the game. Right, this is the third run. He's put some stuff out there. 2, 3. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he needs another. Maybe he needs another turn. Maybe he can't quite do this every single time. But as we're in this last round here, I think, you know, to the point that I was harping on earlier with Hung, like I think this is what we're seeing. And again, Vlado's Hunter misses here. Big 7-point bird can't be hunted. It's pretty painful, certainly for him to watch. Yeah. And cycle stuff out with the Martin. But as I was saying about Young, it's like everyone here is taking 5, 6, 9-point turns, and he is capped at a 4 or 5-point turn. You know, if he's got resources and he's playing cards from his hand, you know, maybe some more from that, but he just can't score at the same pace. So the fact that his bird points are higher right now is the only thing that's really keeping him as competitive in this game. Looks like a huge acquisition of birds. What is going on here? Oh, they're out of eggs. They're out of eggs, and so fish are eggs now. Yeah, the kind of thing that happens in every copy of Wingspan when you're playing at 4 or 5 players and everyone starts getting really good. You're like, oh, okay, there's not enough eggs to do all this stuff. The kind of thing that when you play it first, there's just like so many of these eggs. How is that possible? That's amazing. I love that rather than go and open another copy, they're just using the same homebrewed thing that we do of using food for eggs. That's so funny. All right, looks like we're running a bottom row here. Are we eating an egg? We are eating an egg. So there is another plan from Wei to play another creature by the end. He's got a full rainbow there. We know that there's no bluebirds left. So I don't know, what is that? Oh, we know he's got the scissor flycatcher, the scissor tail flycatcher or whatever, scissor tail thing. So it could be that he's angling for, although unless he's got a secret resource underneath there, he's not going to get it unless there's a successful hunt, which is not a wild thing to assume with 2 hunters coming in after us. So he might actually stumble into the final resource to play the scissor flycatcher there. I'm sure he's got some backup that's worth something along the way. But yeah, he looks like he's going to have to do that to finish out the game here. And Henry back in the tank here, you know, he moved pretty quickly the past 2 turns. Sort of uncharacteristically, certainly seems like he's been mulling the most over in this game and kind of contemplating the cards that are possible in this deck, doing some counting. But yeah, he's got 2 actions remaining here and doesn't have space for those eggs. So it's you know, like, do I play something and then run eggs, or do I run eggs twice and just do what I can do? How much space does he have? 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure how full these are. I'm gonna assume these are all mostly full. So that might mean that his action on the last turn is like literally just score 3 points running the egg row again. Might just be like out of gas. Misses this time. Wei looks at his hand. He's like, oh, if I can't get this resource, what's going to happen? That was, maybe I'm reading into it, but that felt like a tell to me. There's another chance here with a smaller bad hawk that's bad at hawking. And are we about to run through the deck? We sure are. I don't know that I've seen this, but I think we are about to run out the deck. So I guess that means we're going to reshuffle and go to the discard pile. But yeah, there's just a ton of stuff under that sand crane. Is that a hit? It sure is. Wei is very happy with that. Snaps off that worm right away. Flips the scissor tail back to the front of his hand, I'm sure. And I'm not sure what the oh, they're reshuffling the deck. They're trying to figure out what to do with the deck now. Actually, we can see the judge's hands just off camera there doing the shuffle, which is pretty funny because these cards are not going to be used as actual birds. They could be literal blank cards, and it would probably be exactly the same thing between now and the end of the game. I mean, I guess technically the Purple Martin here is drawing a real card, but I don't think it's going to be anything. It is possible here. I can't quite tell between the fake eggs and the real eggs what Vlado's I think those all go away. He's maybe just out of resources, but it does look like he has at least one grain left there. He might need to be playing something, but no, I think he's still got space for eggs. Yeah, he's definitely got space for eggs, so I think he's still playing out. Here's the cute barn owl we mentioned earlier. And here's where running out of space is really hurting, right? Every bird that's being played now is -2 points, getting consumed those eggs. But, you know, he knows that he has another turn left, and playing eggs for 2 turns, I think, looks like it's not quite enough. Let's see how many eggs were there available. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so running eggs twice wasn't that many points, but it's definitely a fizzle of an ending for Young here. There's the Baltimore Oriole that I mentioned earlier. Looks like a pretty weak Phoebe or whatever that is for Henry. What is that, a 3-point bird? Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess that's still better than running the Finch, and he must have been full up on eggs entirely. I'm not sure that playing that bird was correct at the end here with the last action. Maybe just running the middle row and, like, I think placing, does he place any eggs? Would have maybe placed 1 egg, maybe 0. I'm trying to tell where he took the egg off of. I think he would have placed 1 egg, hunted, tucked a card. So that's 2 points and maybe a hunt. And then that bird, I think, is worth 3 points, but he paid a point for it. So I think it's a very marginal little error there. And I'm going to do a quick pause so I can go find the actual scores. Okay. We got the scores as updated as we're doing the roundabout here. We're not going to have them count all the way through, but I'll talk a little about our bonus cards. In fact, Henry's last bird play there was about his bonus card. Vlado has 1 bonus card at the end of the game, which ends up being worth 0 points to him. Also, 1 bonus card for Young at the end of the game worth 2 entire points to him. I believe it's just 1 card as well for Wei for 6 points. And Henry, we know, has 2, but he manages to meet both of their objectives for full 7. I think it's geography and photographer, so 14 points for him. And that actually makes the difference at the end of the game. Vlado's going to end with 94. We got 97 for Young. We got 101 for Wei, and then 108 for Henry. If you remember, I said 14 points for his score there. So that vaults him from 94 to 108 basically is the difference there. Now, admittedly, one of those bonus cards is one that he drew off the Cerulean Warbler, so you could expect a couple of those points there. But yeah, absolutely huge bonus cards making the difference between winning and losing there. Everyone hovering around pretty nearly 100 points in this game. And I think just really wonderfully played by all of them. This was a really cool system and strategy to see. Normally a game where all the power birds come into play is actually kind of quite boring, but this one actually was one that was an exciting version of the power birds coming into play. And I really loved seeing that Wei, who did not draw any of the 4 power birds while all other 4 were in play, was the player who came in second place just off of the back of an extremely powerful combo supported by the fact that he was getting some free food throughout the course of the game that allowed him to segue that into some really big power birds for over 50 points of birds at the end of the game. So it was really, really neat to see. And honestly, this was a pretty cool game of Wingspan. So hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching. See you around.